Tito.
Hey.
Mr. Tito, thank you for joining me in the studio for
Thanks
this
for having
podcast, buddy. Yeah, we've been trying to work in some more of the players that play on the
Sure.
stream.
Yeah.
Because a lot of you guys are really fascinating. You know, we had a conversation with Cinnabon a couple
Cinnabon's
weeks ago,
fascinating.
and you were next up on the list, and we really just want to give people the opportunity to know a little bit more about you, because
Very cool.
one of the most beautiful things about poker, in my opinion, is the people that come to this game, right?
Yeah.
You get people from all walks of life that do all kinds of fascinating things.
Yeah.
And this is just a really great opportunity to get to know more about those people.
Very cool. I mean, you know, right off the bat, I would encourage you to raise your bar on what you consider interesting.
Yeah.
But,
No,
it's an awesome opportunity. That's why we play too, is
Yeah.
meet everybody and that kind of stuff. So yeah, it's exciting. Let's do it.
Yeah, man, let's do it. All right. Well, first I wanted to get to know a little bit about your background.
Sure.
Are you originally from Austin?
No, I've been here about 8 years. I'm from the DC area.
Okay.
So I grew up really close to Quantico. Like actually my backyard was Quantico. And we had we would even, when Quantico was they had like barracks there, and when they were overstaffed, we would even like put up some of the they called them cadets at the house, just to try and we've been right there, about 45 minutes south of DC. And then I was there up until I worked for a company that was trying to open an office here in Austin. And so me and Kristen, my wife, we came out and we're thinking like we're going to be here for like 6 months, help them open the office. And then we just kind of fell in love with Austin, and we're like, all right, we'll stay put.
It's Austin's a pretty great area, man.
Yeah.
It's hard to beat. There's so much good food, good music. If you're into that,
Everything.
There's pretty much everything. You know, you drive 45 minutes, you can find yourself in a beautiful landscape.
Exactly. Yeah.
It's hard to beat. A lot of good schools, and I'm sure it's just great for family. So.
Yeah, it's funny. Like we would travel for different little reasons, and like every time we went somewhere, we were like, oh man, it's awesome here. And then after a while, we were like, maybe where we're at just sucks.
Yeah.
Like we should just go somewhere else. And so, but yeah, I couldn't agree more. Austin's fantastic, and the people are great. Like it's a more friendly place in general compared to like some of the big cities we spent some time in. So yeah, can't beat it.
Yeah, it's hard to beat. I mean, I've lived in Texas my whole life, but I was born in Dallas. And Dallas, if you've ever been to it, is just such a contrast to Austin.
Yeah.
I've come down here plenty of times. I have friends that go to UT.
Right.
I have family down here. So I knew that if I was going to stay in Texas, Austin was where I wanted to be.
Cool.
Just because it is just such a dramatic difference from, quite frankly, the rest of the state and from a lot of other large cities. And now it's one of the biggest.
Yeah, I was gonna say we're you know, I call us part of the problem there. People like us are currently making it more like Dallas, but you know, we'll enjoy it before we screw it up.
Yeah, no, it's I don't know, man. I think it'll still have its own flavor in that sense. So
That's true. Very true.
I'm not too worried, but I know there are a lot of longtime locals that are like, the soul of Austin is leaving or whatever.
You know, enjoy the property value going up or whatever it takes to make you happy about that. But,
exactly. Well, man, you got a wife, you got 2 kids.
Yeah.
I am curious. You're also starting a company. How the hell do you make time to play poker, man?
Oh, well, you have to. I mean, it's just for sanity's sake. Like I've been playing poker for like 20 years, so it's always been a part of my life, and so it's so I carve out the time. I work from the table a lot too, so I have
fantastic.
I literally just got a bigger new iPhone yesterday because I was like, I need more screen for all the crap I'm doing. So I can play poker poorly and work poorly, but I can do them both at the same time. But so I definitely carve out some time for that, and you know, I think it kind of fluctuates. Like the company is just a crazy amount of it, and the secret is Kristen, my wife. I mean, she's because she actually works for the company. She's our graphic designer. So if you guys see the logo down there, any of that stuff, she develops all that, and so she's handling that for, you know, overtime, and then she's taking care of the kids and everything. So like we try and definitely carve out some days where we're doing a lot there. But yeah, the time definitely is like tight, but if you don't start carving out time for like something that you enjoy, and poker's such a good distraction because you have to think about it, you have to dive in. Like if you go out in a golf course or something, you're just thinking about work the whole time anyway. So like the poker just it forces you to kind of like, it's almost like a weird meditation at that point. Like it's still, you're not relaxing, you're still kind of like diving in there, but it's a great way to like force yourself to kind of concentrate on something different. And so I just make sure there's time for it, and I'm lucky on the work side too. Me and 2 of my best friends founded the company, so like we split it up pretty well. But I mean, it's a lot. It ends up between the kind of the 60 and 80 hours a week mark, and a lot of travel and a lot of I fit work in at weird times too, because we work with global groups too, so I can do a lot like really late night, really early morning. So it kind of works out. But yeah, I mean, regardless of what I'm doing, there'll always be plenty of time allocated to poker. That's mandatory.
Yeah, mandatory. I get it, man. A lot of people use this game as sort of an escape or a way, especially if they have the opportunity and the luxury of being able to work remote or be able to do their job from a poker table, because poker is, quite frankly, 95% of the time it's boring as hell, right? So you have the time if you are able to dedicate it to that, like at the table in between hands. If the conversation is not flowing super hard, or even if it is, you still can make time to do stuff for work a lot of time. 100%. I see people with their laptops, like they'll be in the middle of a hand with a laptop right here, and just working away. And I think that is something that's really cool about this game, is that it's a social interaction experience, but it is also loose enough that it allows people to pretty much do their own thing while they play.
It's a good mental level of like engagement, right? And then like as you mentioned, there's kind of like those like short temporal like highs and lows, and so that allows you to kind of like, you could have an hour go by where you don't even play a hand, and so but then you could also have an hour go by where you didn't have time to think. So it's very cool in that regard. But and it requires kind of a good, like you mentioned, either like a remote job or something that you kind of like, just it works for that reason. But I'm lucky enough that that's the case now. So
no, that's good, man. That's good to hear. So you said you've been playing for almost 20 years. What was your first exposure to poker? How'd you get into it?
So actually it was a blast. So me and Jim, one of the co-founders, his older brother, we were in high school. His older brother worked at this shitty like roller rink, and it was like it was indoor soccer, indoor roller hockey, and then they had this big gymnastics thing on the side, and so that closed at midnight. And so after it closed, like unbeknownst to the ownership and management, like we would play poker.
That's hilarious.
And so we did a lot of other dumb stuff too. We used to play full court bocce ball is what we called it. We would just like chuck it across the gymnastics thing and see whatever. But we had a lot of fun. But then we started a poker game, and it started as one table, and then we started doing like multi-table, and then it was always like sit and go tournament style back then. And then we started getting into cash games, and then it got to the point where it was like the games were getting really good and good for us. Like we were idiots. Like it was like back then, and like we didn't know what we were doing. And poker used to be so much easier, and so we got into it. I got really excited about it there, and so. That's when that was still kind of pre Black Friday, like you could still play online. So I started getting into online, and then started having a little bit of early success doing that, which was like, again, not for any like merit reason. Just it was like, you play enough tournaments, you're gonna win one, and then so there's a couple of those, and then that became like a rush and excitement, and so started studying a little bit more, and it was totally different back then. Like we didn't have any kind of like GTO or anything like that back then. Back then it was like, be aggressive, be like all like, reading some of the Phil Gordon books, like, reading some of Doyle's books, like all that kind of stuff. And so I got like just super interested in that place, and then started doing small stakes online, tournaments online, back in the, poker room days, Poker Stars, when we still had access. And then, that became kind of a, like a side job for a while I was doing some school and doing some other stuff. And so that was sort of how it was earlier. It was just easier access to online poker too, and so it was back before it was tied in with a few things, and then that was brutal too. I lost some cash when Net Teller went away for us, and so that was a little bit of a poker break for maybe a year or something like that.
Yeah, that makes sense. No, it's cool to hear that you still very much have one of those like hometown, like started playing poker, young in college, playing with a bunch of buddies. I always love hearing about stories like that, especially one that happened at a roller rink / soccer field / whatever it was. That's really cool, man. Those kind of things are like, you really see how the game used to be played when it wasn't, so above ground or so commercialized.
That was the only option. Yeah. And then you start meeting people at home games and that kind of stuff, and traveling around a little bit, and it's so different then, because you like, and we were, young kids, we didn't care. But like when you look at that today, you're like, the risks you're taking, like the people that you're like just going into their living room in the middle of the sudden, you're like, I hope he's cool. Like, I mean, that's, it's so wild. Cause like the stuff I would never do today, but like, but yeah, that was poker back then, so, yeah, pretty cool.
I wasn't really around playing poker for a lot of that. Most of my experience has almost exclusively been in Texas card rooms or a few casinos outside in like LA or Vegas, right? Cool. So I've played one or two home games, but I never had experiences like that. But it's
this is better. Like what you have now is way better.
I fully agree. From everything that I've heard, I assume that this is a lot better. But there's still kind of like a and maybe it's a bit nostalgic wrapped into it. But there's a camaraderie and I don't know, a different vibe to it that it appeals to a lot of different people versus this, even though I think objectively coming to play a public game where everything is like, it's safe. Like,
right. That's such a big deal. Yeah, it is. And I think that, we still have, the, $20 friend get together games, that kind of thing too. Like that's just fun. And there's so many, like at least the people I hang out with, there's such a varying degree of people who are like, either poker pros all the way down to people who just like, I saw it on ESPN once. It looks cool. Let's go sit down and screw around. It's like, those things can be a lot of fun. But yeah, I mean, if you're talking like you want to get into, like the opportunity that clubs like the Lodge and others give us now is so great to have the consistency. And for me, the safety, like I think that's a big deal in terms of like, knowing that we have a legal and a safe spot with security and all that kind of stuff. Because I've been in private games. I've been in a private game that was robbed. I've been in a bit of some games that are like, it's like, okay, you forget what you're signing up for and what you're exposing yourself to with that kind of stuff. So no, undoubtedly we've evolved into a better place. So don't feel too bad about missing out on any of that.
Fair enough. Yeah, I mean, I agree with a lot of that. It's really nice to have a space like this that you can come to consistently.
Yeah.
That you just know is there, you're not gonna have any problems,
right?
Unless there's just maybe some asshole at the table or something. But
that's poker too.
Yeah,
that's
poker.
That can be fun. Like there's ways to enjoy that. But no, but like like the everything from like staff and like just better people in terms of like people you want to, if you're gonna hang out here for 10 hours or something like that, you want to be around people who are cool and enjoyable and that kind of stuff. And so that's nice because that's consistent part of coming to something like this versus like. And home games are fun too. I play a lot of home games. It's just, but usually they're people that at this point I know either from here or through, through other means. And a lot of people that I work with in one regard or another are also poker players. And so they host games and that kind of stuff. So that's, that's a lot of fun too. But this is kind of like the foundation that's always around.
Yeah.
So
exactly. Yeah. Safe and reliable. How did you find the Lodge?
So I was one of the earlier groups. I'm 1508.
Really?
At the Lodge.
Oh, man,
so
that's so cool. You and Cinnabon were like up there.
He's got me beat, but I usually can get it. If he's not at the table, I'm usually the oldest member. But when he's there, he's 300 something.
Yeah,
so
he's crazy.
He's been around a long time. But yeah, so I came. So I started. Where did I go? I went to like one of the tiny. It's not around. It wasn't around for very long. I went to. It was off Palmer, and I went there first, and I was like, oh, there's clubs. Like that's awesome. Because I didn't come here for that reason at all. I came here for work, but then learning about the clubs, I was like, oh, this is cool. I can do that. And so I played at one of the places that like very clearly had problems, but I thought that was it. And then I heard about the Lodge, and so I checked it out. I lived like maybe 5 minutes away at the time, so it was perfect. And so kind of came here. It felt like better than a lot of the other spots, and so I started playing there. I played a couple of the other clubs too for a while, just kind of like feeling it all out. And then the Lodge really started kind of like firming up as the best option around. And so I've been doing it for a while, and then for me with work, it can be like there's times where all of a sudden I'll disappear from here for like 3 months at a time or something because I'm raising a fundraising round or just some massive requirement for the company. But and then even prior to the company that we started, like same kind of thing with just some of the work I would do. And so it was so it just sort of was great to have the ability to kind of show up when you can and that kind of thing. And so I've been coming here now for 7 or 8 years, however long it's been around.
Oh,
so,
wow.
Yeah. It's been
one of the OGs, man.
Yeah. And it's, met so many people from it. And, now it's like a community that I'm just in. So it's like, when you hear about other spots opening up, you're like, man,
I'm good.
This is a good spot. I like the people here and that kind of thing. So it's, but yeah, it's been great. It's been great. It's changed a lot. It's grown a lot. It's, it's the perfect spot for me to show up. So
yeah. No, that's awesome, man. I think you hinted on a lot of things about why people come back here to play, right? Like the community here is just top notch. Like, poker can be kind of a seedy game sometimes. You meet a lot of really unsavory people sometimes,
Definitely.
But just not the case at the Lodge a lot of the time, man.
We're lucky. Yeah, I think I traveled other places, played in LA, played in others, and you're like, you go to a table and you realize everybody here is trying to get $1 off the next person, and it's just people mad when they lose, happy when they win. Like it's just not. There's no like camaraderie at all. It's just sort of like I hate that. Like to me, to me this is and I get it if you're a pro and this is your means. Like that can be harder to compartmentalize. But at the same time, there's more people here who are here to have a good time and meet each other and make friends. Hang out outside of poker too. And so I think that just leads to such a better experience for everybody, whether it's the dealers, whether it's the front of the house, whether it's the management ownership or the other players. Like it's just better. Like it's consistently better. Like it's over 8 years now. I mean, you can meet great people anywhere at a casino, but like, or at a poker club, but like it just happens more here.
Yeah, so, yeah. I think a lot of people would agree with that experience. I really I've never felt so. It's never felt so homely as it does here at like a casino, especially.
Definitely, yeah.
You know, I haven't been to too many other card rooms around the country, but even a few of the ones in Texas, it doesn't feel quite as like a community.
Totally agree. Here. Yeah, I mean, I've been to a lot because I travel a lot for work, so I always like Google around, see if there's any clubs I can show up at, and there's almost always a club. Like even in cities you wouldn't expect. Like we there's usually one, and we show up, and oftentimes it's a little bit more about just the poker and a little bit more about. Or sometimes it's tied into other gambling too, or there's like slots on the side of the wall or something along those lines. And then again, at casinos, like you mentioned, that's a little bit more, by the numbers type stuff. So, but yeah, I think it's I think a lot of it is the place that we're in. Like a lot of the same, like I think like Lodge kind of reflects Austin, really well, and now San Antonio and some of those other groups, and like then just. So the same things that make you like, Austin are the same reasons you're gonna like an Austin poker club versus like, if you're playing in like LA or something where it's just, it's gonna reflect more of the area that you're in, I think. And so that's, probably how I draw the similarities.
Yeah, no, that's I'm glad to hear that your experience is very similar to a lot of the other people I talk to. Is that this place really is just it's different in a way that is hard to really describe until you've been here.
Definitely.
And that's really cool to know. I mean, you've been around since the beginning, it sounds like. I looked back at some of the earlier streams. You've been playing the stream for a long time. Yeah. I mean, we watch you play on stream for several years now, and it's gotten to the point where you play some pretty big games, man.
I have,
and we see you getting in there, battling it out with some of these guys. You find yourself playing against a lot of professionals, a lot of tough players. Like, how do you feel playing against guys that take this game so seriously?
Yeah, well, so for me, the excitement is like self-improvement. Like I want to know that I'm getting better. I want to know that I'm like growing in some case. Like it's you can even tie it back to like people have like addiction in video games, and like you want to know you're progressing. You want to like I'm definitely one of those guys that like they're like when they're making up like loot boxes and all that kind of crap. Like they're targeting me right now. And so poker's no different. And so like one of the best ways to do it is play people better than you. And so like if I'm rarely the best person at the table, but and almost never. But if I'm at a table where I can play people who are better than me, like that's a really happy spot for me. Like I want to know that I'm kind of getting challenged there. And poker's tough because there's a lot of variance in small amounts. But like so playing these people regularly and getting into big games regularly is like because there's such a difference. Like I spent most of my time here at 1-3, and that game's gotten much better too. But like that was such a spot where you were just extremely successful and you can track it. And then, then I can go and get like Mariano to kick my ass or something like that. And you're like, okay, like there's a lot more to learn. There's a lot more to grow. And so, but yeah, for me, it's a comfortable place because the purpose of me being there is really like, number one, like just get better, learn from the people around you, see what they're doing differently than what you're doing, just get exposure to really good poker players. Like that's the interest for me. Like if I love winning, too, but like, but for me, if I have a good session, like cool. But if I have a good session where I felt like I learned something, I felt like I, because the better the player is, the more they're exploiting you. And so like, the more you can recognize that, the better player you're going to be. And so like, if you can kind of watch that, understand that, see how much they're deviating from optimal play because of you and because of, whatever whatever information you're giving them, like that's to me, that's a lot of fun. And so that's exciting. But yeah, so I'm lucky and I'm fortunate in a position now with the the business that I started and some of that. So like it's, the stakes are not that big of a deal in terms of like the capability of playing it. I still want to be making good decisions though. I don't want to, I want to be a winning player. I want to be, so it's just funny because like, that first 5 or 6 years playing 1-3, I was up 6 figures. And then, I lost that in the stream, so it's like, it's just funny the way it goes, but I learned a lot. What a ride. It's weird how it can go, but it's but it's worth it. And I'm better because of it. I learned because of it. I started knowing like who to follow, who to pay attention to, how to, where are those pieces. So for me, yeah, there's big games, there's big battles. I really love that. That's, but I can go play 1-2 and enjoy that too. Like for me, it's really more about, and I come here in the morning and play often. And it's, it's really more about like, honing the game, learning and having a really good time while you're at it. Like, meeting good people. That's the best part of it.
Yeah, man. No place better to do it than here, I think. I mean, against all these tough guys that you play against, like what would you say keeps you competitive or even gives you an edge against some of these other guys that you play with regularly?
Yeah, I mean, I think edge is tough because there's like a lot of these players are very, very good. So I think you have to be willing to go into a situation knowing you're outmatched oftentimes. And I think that there's, I mean, poker is kind of a great equalizer in terms of things like, often it's more true in tournaments where you have an entry and that's it, versus like cash where you might be up against somebody who's both better than you and has an infinite bankroll. And so you have to, kind of take these things into consideration and see how those variables could be affecting the game itself. But I think, I mean, I have a coach, because I enjoy it. Again, it's really more about the self, but I won't put him on blast, but you guys know him, he plays here. And so, I learn a lot from the community here in terms of, and that's going to be shocking to a lot of people who've seen me do some dumb shit on stream. They're going to be like, somebody told you to do that. Like, but, so, sometimes you're just in the game and you're kind of getting into it, but yeah, I really like to learn. I really like to kind of hone the game. Like when I was playing 1-3 and doing really well, I was getting into a ton of hands early. That was part of the deliberate strategy because, everybody was relatively, passive early and then relatively aggressive late. And so, you saw a lot of flops for $6, and then there was very few 3-bet pots. And so you had to kind of hone the game to be successful there. And so just playing a ton of pots and then, trying to play perfect post flop, like I made a lot of money over, in terms of blinds over a long time. Then you go play with some of the guys at these, 50, 100 or 200, 400 games. And that's not a good strategy. Like that's, so you kind of have to hone it, and you kind of have to be very, I like the exploitive side of poker quite a bit. And so, to the point where it's probably even comes at a disadvantage when you really should be like moving more towards optimal play and deviating less. But but that's the fun part for me, is sort of understanding like, why is this, there's nothing more cool than like thinking why somebody would be doing something and then validating that through the play. And then you're like, okay, I was right. And, I made the right decision before it. And then, and then ultimately you can tie that back to dollars, and that's cool. But so I think it would be telling you that I've got an edge over a lot of the people we play here would be a lie. Like, I think it's there's some, sure. But I think but I'm always looking to play with a better poker player than me. I'm always looking to, to just be in those games and trying to hold my own and learn from it. And that's if that happens, I consider it a successful session.
For sure, man. No, that's good to hear. Even though you don't play this game professionally, you still take it seriously. It's really, I love hearing that, because there's a lot of people that just put in a lot of hours. They kind of just do recreation, like purely for fun. But I love hearing about the guys that still take it seriously and just want to get better. Like there's so far to go for every player.
Absolutely.
And the more you can improve, the more fun the game gets, at least to me.
100%.
And I have always had that same mindset of like, I want to find the toughest game in the room.
Yeah.
And even though it may not be like the most positive EV spot or something, I know at least I'm going to pay to learn something.
100%. I actually actively like lobby, like when you hear like players who are like, oh, this person's good for the game, not good for the game, or like, should we grow the game with better play? Like, I hate that. I'm like, no, get them in here, play them, especially for something like the stream, right? Like and I'm glad that we do this, because it's we like this, something like the best stage in poker, in my opinion. I don't think there's a better show in poker right now. There's certainly bigger markets, but I don't think there's a better, but with you guys announcing it, with the quality of the cameras, with all of that, I don't think there's a better show out there. And so the best poker players belong on that. And so I think I want to see more pros. I want to see more players like value that and want to be on the biggest stage, versus like, as you mentioned, like, well, if I invite this person over here, like, that's going to be better for the, for the action. Like, I don't know if everybody wants to watch that.
Yeah.
I mean, they don't get me wrong. There's cool stuff about like massive hands and all that kind of stuff too. But, I want to see the best players playing. And I think that should be an element of it too. And so I think, you can make a game better by improving yourself and by learning from it. And so, but everyone has different motivations. Like, like you said, I have the advantage of not relying on it for income. So I think it's easier for me to say that than, somebody who's, doing it for rent. And I think that's just, which is nothing wrong with that. And there was about 2 years I played for online for my living. And it was much easier to do back then than it was now. But, I was certainly more motivated by cash at that time. So it was fair. Like, it was a good session meant a winning session. So, I've certainly changed my thought over some time. So, I think that's, it's really interesting how many dynamics there are, and like why people are there, what the motivation is. And then, so I think there's a lot of fuel to make it like, confrontational. There's a lot of fuel to make it like, to add tension. And so people who can cut through that and still have a good time while they're dealing with that, like those are my favorite people to play with. So, and we have a lot of them here.
And we do. I mean, I played with plenty of people here. I used to play with like Jay Wynn and Chaz and a few people a couple of years ago, and like they still very much are those type of people.
They're cool as hell.
And I mean, tough players. And I do agree that like my favorite form of poker to watch is like dudes like duking it out in the arena, right? Like like guys that are both sharpened swords, ready to go.
Yep.
And it's such the thing that we do kind of have to struggle with here on the stream, or that rather there's like some friction, is like, how do we make these games both entertaining for the people who like that aspect versus the purely recreational aspect? Because a lot of the viewership comes from people who just want to watch others like dunk around and game. Right?
Totally. Yeah, I mean, and you're welcome.
Yeah, exactly.
Exactly. But, no, I think that they're 100%, and it should be a mix. Like you don't want a bunch of super pros playing like 18% VPIPs and like and just watching a bunch of single bet folds and all that kind of, like, you don't want that either. But but in reality, I think like poker is evolving to a more aggressive spot too in big games where a lot of the best players are still those who are selectively aggressive and they can create these big situations. But I mean, it depends on the stakes too. Like, if we're playing our usual 5-10, like, then there's a lot more opportunity to bring people in who are different levels and still be a good time, good for the show, that kind of thing. And then when we're getting into the big ones, then you want to see, some of the best players going at it. So, I mean, different episodes appeal to different people. I think that's, but it's all good. It's all part of putting on a good show.
Absolutely, man. And you certainly do when you play. So we appreciate that. I love watching it. I
appreciate that, man.
Yeah, man. It's fun to watch because like you play a lot of hands, you get in there, you put people in spots.
Yeah.
And it's just, on top of that, you're also talkative and entertaining. So
I appreciate that.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm doing it for me. I'm not doing it for anybody
enough,
else.
man.
I have a good time.
Part,
I have a good time. So if anybody else likes watching it, then that's awesome. But no, it's a blast, and it's and I think that's, again, it's that exploitative part of the game where I try and get into a lot of hands, and I try and understand kind of what's there, and that creates more opportunity to learn. It creates more opportunity to lose, and so like there's it's sort of a deliberate decision that you make at that point. But it's if you can get to that point and you can become a winning player as you're learning in that element, I think that's how you create the best poker players, or those who come from aggression, those who come from more of a loose style, and then they turn into kind of honing that into more perfect play. I think that's when you see some of the better players who come on here who do play a lot of aggressive. There's a couple examples there, like Bulldog's my favorite poker player, right? I think he's very aggressive and then turns into brilliant play post flop. It's very exploitative. It's very a lot of like short temporal information that influences like his decision making, and like I think that's amazing. So like that's what I'm working towards, right? Like I think that's it, and you don't get there from just trying to get better at the the more conservative approach to the game. I think that you don't give yourself as much exposure to decisions. You could get there, but you're gonna do it over a lot more hands. And so I think that's my take.
Yeah,
if you will.
Yeah. No, I mean, it's a good take, man. I mean, you play streams a lot. The stream is a very public platform.
Yep.
Is there ever any concern about striking a balance between like personal, professional life and playing on the stream? Because like some of these games are like very unapproachable to a lot of people, and if, they see someone bluffing for like 20K, that seems insane, right? And so I didn't know if there was any sort of balance that you have to strike with that.
There's people who don't understand it, and it certainly comes up. I mean, I'm in my life, I'm managing a cybersecurity company that's an artificial intelligence company as well that we founded, and so there's folks that like lucky enough for me, there's a lot of people who are also like poker players in that space. There's a lot of data scientists who play poker, a lot of investors who play poker, a lot of financial analysts who do. So like in that case, like they kind of get it. They understand variance. They understand like the risk reward and like and all of that. So that's useful. But yeah, there's others who are just like, what are you doing? You insane bird. Like I mean, like there's like like we didn't come up from with a lot of money, and so like when my brothers see that kind of stuff, they're like, okay, like that was a year's worth of rent, and then you just like just like threw it in there with with nut low, and then just like, and even when it works out, they're like, it's still dumb. Like, they so it's so there's a balance. I mean, for me, it's I do what I do. I am who I am. Like it's not I think it's when you hide it, it's the weird stuff. Like when you play fewer or like that kind of thing. Because I think it's a noble game. It's an awesome thing to do if you as long as you're doing it within the realm of like what you can and what you should be. And so I think that's there's a ton of legitimacy there. I think when it starts becoming like not being as upfront about those things is when people start stigmatizing poker and those kinds of things as well. So I really don't do a lot other than just explain myself often to people who are asking, whether it be like family or personal life. Business life, for the most part, people get it. A lot of poker players in the business world, a lot of poker players in the artificial intelligence world. And so, I mean, there's even some overlap there in terms of like, over the last 10 years, we've seen some poker pros building models to play poker, and Noam had some great work in that space, and it was that's really exciting because it's about optimization. And so like if you have large data sets that you can optimize with, like AI is an awesome tool for that. So like we even use poker oftentimes as ways to get people to understand how a model might be operating, and so there's I even use those kind of poker theory concepts when I'm getting through business myself.
Oh, really?
So yeah, it's more of an asset than it is a detriment, even though I spend a lot of time here.
Yeah.
So yeah,
no, that's
to outweigh that. Yeah,
that's good to hear, man, that it isn't in any way like negatively impacting. It does make sense that there's a lot of crossover, right?
Don't get me wrong, there's people who think it's
Poo-poo it a little?
I'm out here like on a roulette table or something like that. like there's and sometimes it feels that way, but yeah, there's it's not like everybody approves, but it's what I do.
Yeah, that makes sense, man. Well, what you hinted at a little bit, but what kind of skills cross over from playing poker versus being a business owner and working in cybersecurity?
So there's I think one of the biggest things is, again, almost like that, like in poker you would consider it like exploitative, but understanding like where people are coming from, understanding like are they being genuine, are they being disingenuous? I think it's really important to understand. Like, so one of the things, part of my job that's a big part of what I do, and a big part of what a lot of CEOs have to do, is raise money. And so you have to get the right investors to come in. You have to make sure that you're going to want to partner with them. And so, there was, when I founded the company 2.5 years ago, with, again, me, Jim, and Tanner, buddies of mine, we founded it together. The first thing you have to do is raise some capital to get started. And so in a space where there's a lot of money to be made, a lot of people aren't there to entertain your thought or understand you from a business proposition. A lot of them are there to glean information from you and give it to their own like incubation teams or try and beat you to a patent or some of those things. So oftentimes when you're in those meetings and you're having those conversations, you're assessing them and you're assessing their motivations, and it really comes down to like, are they bluffing? Are they trying to partner with you and make it in a mutually empowering decision, or are they trying to get everything they can out of you? Because you have to ride that line of giving them enough about what you do and to make them confident that you're capable of doing it, without giving them so much that they could just walk away and do it without you. And so I feel like there's a lot of skill there, and it really goes down to a lot of different roles. I've hired a lot of poker players. I've hired a lot of poker players from here because there's understanding ROI is so important. Understanding EV is so important, because you can apply that to anything you can quantify. And so people understanding like why you might make a business decision, why you might say, hey, let's attribute 30% of our resources to just this one deal over here, which might sound crazy on paper, but then when you start looking at things like negative equity associated with these decisions, like it can be the smartest thing you can do. And so one thing that some of the business world and the investment world has gotten away from this, but I hit home very hard that we are making bets. Like, I think that's so some people don't like that connotation. I love it. Like, as an early stage company that's trying to create a new category, like we are definitely placing bets right now, and we have to make the smartest, sharpest bets we can make, because that's how you win, and that's how you take those risks. What we're doing right now is really trying to create a new type of cybersecurity, because artificial intelligence is so. Hopefully your viewership doesn't just plummet right now from me talking about this stuff, but like it's so artificial intelligence getting everywhere. Everybody's kind of aware that ChatGPT kind of kicked it off, but it's been pretty invasive for a long time now. But it's also extremely vulnerable. It's really easy to attack AI. It's really easy to manipulate AI, and that's where we come in. We secure artificial intelligence systems against those attacks and manipulation. And so it's a really fast changing like time and a fast changing set there. So a lot of the decisions we have to make at a company, we're making for the first time. So we really have to understand risk. And so people who have done that in the poker world in an easier way to assess and understand the decisions that you're making, where you understand the risk, you understand, like, there's a lot of times in poker where you have to make a call where you're like, well, the equity's there to the point where like I'm probably going to lose, but over my lifetime, I'm printing money by making this decision. And so like you just have to, if you can apply that type of logic to the real world, to the business world, it really does help you.
Yeah, I really love the way that you put that, because I think a lot of the biggest disconnect for when people see someone play poker, mm-hmm. and then they give it such a negative connotation, versus whenever you say like I'm a poker player, or whenever you say I'm starting a business,
right,
or something like that. Like there's more of a positive side, it seems. Socially,
you're more likely to lose money in starting a business, by the way, than you are becoming a poker player.
Exactly, man. It's all about risk assessment.
Exactly.
Is really what it boils down to.
That's right.
I think poker is one of the most fascinating things about the game is that it is such a good allegory for a lot of aspects of life.
100%.
Life is really a lot of being able to weigh the risks of different decisions. Whether like people don't realize that going to something like college is a risk, or like choosing your degree. Spending all that money is a risk. You know, you have to think about
more people should make that decision with that, like a poker player decides whether to come into a pot, right?
Exactly.
I mean, that's 100% true.
It's I don't think people realize just how much actually bleeds over into from a game like this, basically a toy game, into what is the real game of the rest of your life.
Yeah, well said. I mean, I think that's 100% true. I think it's rare that you get something that's so quantifiable like poker. So that's where it gets a little bit softer when you're trying to say something like, you know, I guess with college, you can understand things like, you know, here's how much it's going to cost me, but then trying to quantify the external side. So like poker's nice because it trains you that in a very, you understand the inputs, you understand the outputs, you can measure them, you can project them. And then, so, you know, it gets more difficult to project that in the real world, but everyone should be trying to do that. Everyone should be trying to understand, like, any commitment I make, what's that return on the investment? And so it's, you know, your life will be more deliberate, and if you think about it in those terms. And so, you know, I mean, when you think about how you're spending your time, when you think about how you're spending whatever resource it is that we're talking about, if you're thinking about it in the terms of like, what am I giving up? What am I getting? What's the risk here? You know, it's just, you're going to make more logical decisions that make sense. And ultimately, like in the business world, that's mandatory. I mean, or I mean, you can lose, you can fail, and a lot of people do, but but yeah, it's funny because, like, I think, you know, when there is that criticism over, like, you know, you're playing a big game, you got six figures in front of you, something along those lines. And it's just funny because, like, I've taken way bigger risks in the business world, and it's just, and that's considered normal and fine. And so it's like, you know, I think, I don't know, like a very, very small percentage of venture capital backed companies, like, hit profitability, even raise money, even make it to a point where there was a positive financial outcome, and like way more than like calling with jacks, like I mean, like it's just so, you know, that there's it really does, you know. I think it's funny because risk is kind of a great equalizer as well, and so you have to kind of think about it in those terms.
Yeah, no, I love all of that, man, because it's such an underappreciated part of poker, and poker gets such a bad rap, maybe justifiably so in some ways, but I think if people really sat down and learned just how similar it is to so many other aspects of trying to become a successful person in life, wading your way through something beyond just like the standard 9 to 5, then it would be a little bit more understandable and appreciated, I think.
Yeah, so. And I think it's like anything else. I mean, there's people who are here for a lot of those awesome reasons that we talked about, and there are people who are here because it's like, oh, I can gamble. And so it's, I mean, I just mean here, I mean playing poker. Like so I think that there's, it's like anything else. It's what you put in is what you get, and you know, you can do it in awesome, very cool ways, and you know, growth ways, and you can also do it in like super degenerate ways, and like that's like fine too. It's a lot of that's how we got into it. But you know, I think that there's it really is like the level of you know, the I don't want to say like the integrity of the decision you make to come play poker. You can do it for a lot of different good reasons. You can do it for a lot of different bad reasons. But I think that's what most people don't get when they're looking at somebody playing cards. Like a lot of times people just sort of think like, okay, that's gambling. That's, you know, that's that person must not value their money or something along those lines. And it's just not the case.
Yeah. No, that's, man, I loved all of that. It's so good. I did want to ask a little bit about more of your background, and we're getting into like cybersecurity and everything. Yeah. Your education is pretty extensive between going to school at ECPI and then you also went to UT. Is that correct? Right. Yeah. All with a pretty heavy emphasis on studying network security and data science, which you've hinted at plenty up to this point. Yeah. Cybersecurity doesn't exactly strike me as something that like a young Tito might have, you know, always dreamed of getting into. So what kind of led you to pick that as a focus for your career?
It was always a hobby. I mean, you know, this might come shocking to the listeners, but I was a bit of a nerd when I was younger, and so you know, it was like video games, like networking, like, you know, just spending time on the internet. Always a hobby. And it wasn't my professional path for a long time. I went down the path of, I worked in restaurants for a long time. I've done every job in a restaurant I met Kristen in a restaurant. Oh, okay. And so we doing that for a long time. Then I started getting into sales associated with that, because I was managing some restaurants, and I met the people who were selling food to the restaurant, and I was like, oh, that seems cool. And so I did that for a while. I did some culinary work for a while. In terms of for that company, showing people how to take the ingredients and make cool stuff. And I did that for a while, and then I got hit with like a really weird event where I worked for the second largest distributor of food in the U.S., and the largest tried to buy them, and I was in a commission role. I was doing great, but all of a sudden, everyone realized you were trying to sell the company, or that the company was trying to sell, and then the government came in and blocked it because they were like, hey, this is going to be a monopoly. Yeah. And so all of a sudden I went from like a really good job with really good commission, a ton of good accounts, and they were like, oh, well, you guys are going to try and sell anyway, so we're just going to go over here. And so like overnight I was making $0, but I still had a job. And so it was just a weird spot. And I was like, okay, this isn't great for the family life. This isn't great for, trying to go in that route. And I was like, I've always been hyper interested in tech. And so I was like, let me pivot. And so did go to UCPI, which is a small school in Virginia. That I actually I don't credit a lot of my learning to school at this point. Like I think it's cool for going through some of the programs, but I think today it's like way more important just to be resourceful than it is to be smart. So like you should just you got to get on YouTube, you got to get on on honestly Reddit. You got to get on like a lot of these spots where people are sharing information and learn a lot there. So I did that deeply. There's a thing called bug bounties, which is basically when these companies ask the public to hack them, and they say, here, come find problems, come find bugs in our software, and if you report them, we'll pay you. And so I used to do that like as a kind of a hobby, because it was like
as a
cool.
hobby. That's awesome.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun, and it was like it was again easier to do when we were younger. You can still do it now though, and so it was a cool hobby. I used to hack a lot of voice oriented stuff. So like
interesting.
So like if you remember back in the old days, if you're a video game player, there was like Ventrilo and Curse Voice and some of these applications. And so a lot of the protocols that were used in those were extremely vulnerable. And so you could even do it to like listen in on other people. And you could do things like even just, I remember the biggest one I found was when you connected to Curse Voice, you could, it sent like a little ping out to everybody who was playing, and then a ping back to see who had Curse Voice. Cause it was always like an overlaid application and type of what you were doing. And so what that then gave you, if you dove into that, was everybody's IP address. And so it was like, so when you're reporting those kinds of things and they say, here's $1,000, like it was like, oh, awesome. And so I got into it that way. And then that turned into, I got really interested in assessing threats. I started really thinking about cybersecurity as kind of like the future battlefield, if you will, in terms of like, what's going, and it's happening like crazy right now. And it's sort of one of those ways that we're allowed to attack each other for some reason. And everyone's kind of cool about it.
Everybody does it. It's fine.
Yeah. It's just going, all right, well, nobody really, it's not as well understood. So that stuff's happening. So my first job ever in tech was a really crappy job for a company called Providence Help Systems, which is like a big tech aggregator for like small office stuff. So like if you have like a small doctor's office or therapist office or something, like you don't have an IT team, you would use these big like companies to handle that. And then my job was to jump in and get all their devices to use encryption. And so they wanted us to literally like remote into every machine, do a download and install, restart the machine. And so I was like, we're doing it the dumb way. So I wrote a script. I sent it out overnight, and then it took this whole project and we did it in one night instead of a whole bunch. And I was like, hey, they're going to love that. It was so great. And like my reward was getting fired the next day because they didn't need me anymore.
Wow.
And
yeah. So, too good at your job.
Yeah. That was like, oops, so then I learned, that was a great lesson. And so then I got into more the cyber side. I went to a company that was called the Media Trust out in DC. And it was, we would take threats that were distributed through like some of the big defense prime contractors, and then my job was to take it apart and try and identify who did it. So all of the threat actors back in the day would try and look like each other. And so my job would be to break apart this file. And then that's when I started identifying artificial intelligence as a really good tool for identifying who actually did it. So like, if you were a Iranian threat actor, you would put like Russian Krylik in your thread and like just try and like, honestly, but like AI was really good at cutting through all of that. And so started really becoming interested in this. I'll try not to keep it too boring, but like there's if you're training a machine learning model or an AI model on a man-made science, it's an extreme advantage, because in a man-made science you actually can have that training set very representative of the full problem. Whereas if you're using it like a natural science, it's really only going to be able to interpret everything that we either understand or we're even able to digitize.
Yeah, what we can input.
Yeah. So in cyber, everything's digital, and so like it's you can fully understand the problem and train a model to do that. And so I got really interested in that. Went to another company that tried to kind of replace antivirus technology with artificial intelligence. That became extremely effective, and that's what everybody does today. Did that for a while, and then the company I was at, our AI model got attacked. And so that gave us the idea for Hidden Layer, which is the company we work at today. And so, that was the path. But, and then poker was there the whole time, but it was just for fun for the most part for a lot of that. But that's how I ended up doing what I'm doing.
I see. Oh no, that's awesome. That's a pretty crazy story. admittedly feel a little out of my depth talking about something like AI because I know it's a burgeoning technology.
Yeah.
It's something that I know, like, of course, I'm familiar with ChatGPT and like some other very basic generic AIs.
Yeah.
But I want you to give me like, and the viewers, like explain like I'm 5, you know, about what is AI and what are the implications for the evolution of that technology today?
Sure, yeah, and it's obviously something that gets discussed in great detail today at like kind of the top of like with like OpenAI and some of these other groups because everyone has their own definitions, and we could certainly use some consistency across those definitions because I think it would make things easier for the general public to understand it. But you can think of AI as a decision maker. It's really just something that there's a lot of different categories within AI. There's kind of data science, and then the smaller bucket is artificial intelligence, and the smaller bucket from that is like machine learning. And then, more recently we've gotten to generative AI, which is ChatGPT. That's having a model actually generate content. They use these transformers, and the idea is to basically like predict the next word, and then you can kind of create prompts and responses, and that's how you start interacting with like chatbots. And so, but as a whole, you can think of artificial intelligence really as a decision maker, and so you can classify something. You can say yes or no. You can predict something, and that's ultimately like all you're doing is you're taking a whole bunch of data. And that's what becomes your training set. And then you have a model, and you train that model on that data to say, hey, recreate this in the future. And so that's, if I wanted to train a model to decide whether or not I should buy a house, whether it's a good deal, I would then give it a whole bunch of data. And a lot of those data would be like houses and records and then that label of whether or not you thought it was a good transaction. And then it'll start to learn that. And, it'll probably discuss features like the square footage. It'll discuss features like how many bedrooms, how many bathrooms, that kind of stuff. And then, you have enough labels of like, yes, it was a good value for the price. No, it wasn't. Then that model's going to know how to make that decision for you. And so we use it in everything. We use it we use it for, Netflix as a recommendation engine when it tells you, what movie should you watch based on the movies you were watching it. It's a model that they trained for that exact reason with all those data sets. Spotify, same thing. Those are called recommendation engines. But then we use it in other business cases. We use it to trade. We use it for, high frequency trading. We use it for predicting what stocks are going to go up and down. We use it for fraud detection. Like the banks all use it like crazy for things like, that's what when you get annoyed because something like, you're traveling and your card gets cut off or something like that. It was probably an AI model that did that. We use it for, most decisions that are being made in a production environment today relative to like online software is made with artificial intelligence models. And then to fast forward to ChatGPT and the generative side, now what you're doing is that same thing. We're mostly training on the internet to have a model take a English language prompt in and give you an English language response. And it can be generative in that sense where you can say, create me something. And now we've expanded in other modalities for like images and documents and all that kind of stuff too. So you can start saying like, make me a picture. You can say, make me a video. And so it's really advancing. And then in terms of the second part of your question with this like kind of like, how's it going to affect things and where's it going to go? I think that's a big sort of area because it's growing so fast and it's getting so smarter and better. And it costs a lot of money to do it, but it's getting to the point where what some people call AGI, which is general intelligence, that artificial general intelligence. Basically my definition for that is when is artificial intelligence going to be as productive as the median human? And people are starting to think that that's coming in the next couple of years. And there's a lot of different definitions for that, but basically like when AI will do your job as well as the median human being, I think we're getting pretty close to that. And not for all jobs, but for many. And I think it's going to be really, if there's anybody trying to decide what field to go into right now, you have to really think about that because, I think it's going to be, I don't mean to make anything political, but I think it's going to be very, very affecting of the jobs that are out there. When you start thinking about self-driving, 7% of the workforce in the United States are drivers, whether it be like, truck drivers or Uber drivers or delivery drivers. And then you look at things like automation with machinery that's being used to replace anybody in a factory setting or in even like fast food. Like there are now employee-less fast food companies that started in Vegas and there's some others now. That's going to continue to grow, like financial analysts, content creators. If you're writing blogs, like most of the blogs on the web right now are written by ChatGPT. And so, or the more recent ones that have been created. When you start looking at like content writers, script writers, like book writers, just like you start amounting like this massive part of the workforce that's getting replaced with these systems. And so now the positive side of that is that should allow us to do more. That should allow us to, to still be humans involved using it to create more. And then for us on the security side, like it's great. We want it to consume everything because then we can protect everything and it's awesome. But yeah, you really have to think about how you're going to interact with artificial intelligence, both professionally and personally. because it's just going to be such a big part of our lives.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's become ubiquitous, and it's everywhere now. And as you said, it's only going to become more prevalent. It's going to replace jobs. I mean, I use it. I use it just for writing scripts on I don't have it write my scripts, but I'll typically say, can you make this better? Just make this better. 100%. And just simple little things like that can really improve how people do their work.
It's getting really good at it too.
Yeah,
it's
really is.
It's getting really, really good. I use
scary.
It daily. I mean, it writes most of my emails.
Yeah.
It's a better email writer than I am.
Exactly,
I search engines are going to be replaced with LLMs very shortly. I mean, I think that there's so it's important that everybody gets good at interacting with it.
Yeah. So what you're saying is it's a good idea to have started a company for AI security.
Yeah, I'll pretend that was on purpose, but that was the timing was fantastic there, and because there's a lot of trust issues around AI too, right?
Sure.
I mean, it's not perfect. I think there's certainly a lot of challenges where a CEO at some company would go down to the data science team and be like, I need a model that's this % accurate, go. And then there was really not a lot of checking in on how they did that. So it's oh man, that was hard. Let me throw this underrepresented group out of the data set because now it's more accurate. And that created a lot of problems too. So we deal with a lot of those things as well, just to make sure things are equitable. There's a lot of responsibility built into how these structures are made. I think that's not our primary reason for existing. There's a lot of companies that do that more primarily, but that stuff matters quite a bit as well, because we don't want a whole bunch of companies running out creating Terminator 2 on us here because we just gave AI all this power and control. And so that's there's a whole level, and there's actually a lot of poker players who study this too. I met several that have groups that talk about the existential threat in artificial intelligence.
Cool.
I mean, it's just you start to think about AI taking over the world type stuff, and I'm not a big believer in it, but it is a discussion topic that because having safety and some of these things built into it is certainly interesting to the to the human population.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I mean, if the viewers hadn't guessed, they could probably hadn't guessed already, they would know that your company's Hidden Layer. That you started for an AI security company. And as I understand, the inspiration for that kind of came from an incident that occurred while you worked at Cylance.
That's right.
Can you tell me more about that and why you felt the need to start your own company as a result?
Yeah. So at Cylance, we used an AI model for antivirus. So this is, again, hopefully not too boring, but antivirus is really just lists of bad shit. Or before AI, that's all it was. It was just a big list of anytime somebody had seen something bad, we make a list. And when you do an antivirus scan on your machine, it would just check your machine to see if any of those things were on the list. And then so threat actors caught on to that. And they said, okay, well, I don't need to write more sophisticated threats. I just need to write newer ones faster because then it won't be on those lists. And then so a lot of threat actors started winning in kind of the early 2000s because they were just okay, I'll just write something and send it, and just get it out there. And bots started writing malware and all that kind of stuff. And so with artificial intelligence, you can take a look at a file that you've never seen before and have it predict whether or not it's malicious or benign. And so I worked at a company called Cylance. That's exactly what we did. I kind of worked my way up there and finished as the head of what we called research and intelligence, which was both data science and threat research. And then my two co-founders now, who are again good friends of mine, Jim and I have been best friends since we were 5 years old, and Tanner I've been really good friends with for 10 years now. So we were at Cylance, and when that artificial intelligence we built into our product, it itself became attacked, and so some threat actors just through interacting with our product were able to manipulate that model, and that's what really woke us up to oh man, this is a whole new area that people can attack. So they're not attacking your email accounts. They're not attacking your servers, your endpoints, your computers. They started attacking the model itself, and they started abusing it in that regard. And so, it was pretty consequential. It was that was a roughly $2 billion company, and most of the revenue came through that model. And so, we dove right on it. We learned oh man, this is a big problem, not just for us. This is a problem for everybody who's investing in artificial intelligence. And that was back in 2019. And so, we started working on technology to secure it back then, and then around 2022, we turned that into a company. And so that was kind of the plan. Now we do a bunch of stuff. We scan models, we monitor their usage, and when they're being used, whether it's ChatGPT or whether it's something in the use cases we talked about before, fraud model, any of that stuff. And with our monitoring, we can identify is somebody using it as they were supposed to be using it, or are they taking advantage of it, trying to steal it. Model theft is a big deal today. If you're Netflix and you spent billions of dollars creating your recommendation engine, you don't just want, some competitor coming up and getting it from you. So we identify a lot of those things. And then, we help companies keep track of all their AI now because there's so much and there's so many different people. Yeah. Yep, absolutely. So yeah, I mean, timing's great. We got a lot of work to do still. We got to, we got to grow the company to to the level where we can keep, a lot of security across. Really, just AI is scaling so fast. Like we have to try and keep up right now, just because there's so much getting implemented everywhere. So that's our goal.
Yeah. So I mean, that's a really cool idea for a company. And it does sound like you guys not only stumbled upon a problem that you saw a solution for, but it's a pretty good timing because it's just going to be everywhere, right?
Yeah, that's right.
And I've looked over your website. It's, I mean, quite frankly, sometimes I look at the website and I'm not even still entirely sure what exactly is the purpose, only because I just don't understand.
No, of course. Yeah.
But looking over the website for Hidden Layer, it mostly emphasizes like the imperative for having secure AI systems. Like, why is that security? You've hinted on a few things, but why? Can you give some demonstrable examples why that security is such a necessity in the modern day?
Yeah, I mean, and it really spans across all the different industry use cases. But like some just critical examples everyone can understand is like a lot of artificial intelligence models are used during surgeries, right? And that's if you think about like a doctor having to even if we narrow it down even further. So let's say I had surgery the other day. I had my deviated septum fixed, right?
Oh, really?
So,
okay, well,
yeah, and
nice.
thanks. I can breathe.
Yeah, you can breathe now.
So you're having a surgery and your surgeon is taking care of you, and they need to give you some form of medicine. Well, trying to have a human being keep track of all the medicines that are possible, like 30,000 medicines that can be used during a surgery, and then how they'll interact with each other, and then how they'll interact with you and your use cases. Impossible for a human being, amazing for an artificial intelligence model. So that's what they use. But if I was an asshole and I wanted to kill you, I could start affecting that model and saying, oh yeah, combine these two, they'll be great. And and so there's things like that are certainly available. There's if you wanted to take down our market, you could start affecting like hedge funds. You could start affecting like prediction models. If you wanted to commit tax fraud, you could go after like AI models that are used in the IRS. I mean, if you wanted to steal money, if you wanted to, like we oftentimes we protect models that are we talked about credit card fraud before, so a lot of artificial intelligence is used there because there's so many credit card transactions. You just need a big data solution. And so there's been models who've been trained a ton on like purchases and geographies and time of day and all these things. Now if I'm a threat actor, I go out to the dark web, I steal like 100 credit cards, and then I start conducting transactions not to try and commit fraud, but to try and learn what's going to get flagged and what's not. And if I use some new tooling that exists today, it's called reinforcement learning, and there's some attack techniques there. Eventually what I can do is steal that fraud model. And then I can check all of my transactions that I want to make and which ones is it going to allow and which ones is going to not allow. And now I can commit fraud in perpetuity. And so like those are just some examples. But as it gets plugged into everything, you start being able to impact it. You start being able to steal, you start being able to abuse, you start being able to have these real human outcomes because of what you're doing. And so I think there's no, like look at automated driving right now. I mean, it's getting so popular, so many companies are leaning into it, and if you can affect those models, you can kill people, you can cause accidents, we've seen examples of that. And so I think that it's it really creates these scenarios where like you have to secure it. It's a human life scenario. It's a full market scenario. I mean, there's some highly consequential outcomes if we don't secure artificial intelligence.
Yeah, man. I mean, wow, we can just add a few things to my list to be anxious about now. But,
yeah, exactly.
But
I don't make anybody feel better talking about these things. But yeah.
But I mean, it seems really important, and I like that you're turning this. I mean, you found, like I said, you found a problem that you see that needs a solution, and it has such a human element to it of protecting people.
That's right.
Which is something that's very admirable to me.
Oh, I appreciate that.
Yeah, it's I mean, yes, you're starting a business. Obviously, you're probably looking to make profit, but
it's not altruistic. In totality. I mean, like don't get me wrong, we love what we do and we love our mission, but yeah, we're for profit. But I think that it's and this sounds crazy cheesy, but I'm a CEO, it's my job. But I think if your goal was to protect humanity at scale right now, I don't think there's a better place to do it than by securing artificial intelligence. And so there's a lot of passion in what we do for that reason. And again, like kind of in cybersecurity for a while now, like it really, I think if you're trying to protect human beings, technology is where you have to focus on. And then if you're looking at the biggest, most scaling, most like intrinsically like just deployed solution right now, that it's artificial intelligence. So I do feel like the best way we can protect humanity is by securing artificial intelligence right now.
Man, that's awesome. That's cool. Well, good luck with the company, man.
Thank you.
Because I know that's a lot of stress.
Oh, yeah.
But it seems like you guys are really trying to make something good that it could be really beneficial.
I appreciate that. Yeah, we got a good team. We'll keep going.
Awesome. Good to hear, man. Well, moving back to poker a little bit.
Yeah.
getting back into the crossover, I wanted to ask if there are any implications for AI in poker, like even if you just want to speculate for me.
Most certainly. I think we're already starting to see examples of that. And actually it's been happening for a while. So we've seen like even, Doug played against some artificial intelligence models not too long ago. Yeah. And you start to see how they're advancing. I think what we're going to see, the two biggest predictions I'll make right now is I think we're going to see solvers for other games. So, we haven't seen solvers for like PLO. I think artificial intelligence is going to give us that opportunity. I think we're going to be able to see more multi-handed results because artificial intelligence models can so like solvers are going to get better at 3-handed, 4-handed, 5-handed.
They can handle the game tree.
Exactly. Yeah, they can handle so much more data input into identifying that. I think remember AI is making predictions, so it may not be like the same level of consistency as like a solver, but I think that it really gives us that opportunity. There's some cool people that are working on that problem. You should check out Poker GPT, where they're fine-tuning Chat GPT. So cool. If you know Victor, he's on a couple other streams. He started a company to do that. He's a poker player, and he's using Chat GPT. They're fine-tuning it for poker, and they're ultimately trying to get it to like play perfect poker, like expand solvers. That's some really cool stuff. I mean, if you're talking about like optimal, like the way to get to optimal, like AI is designed for optimal decision making and that kind of thing. So, and it can just handle like large scale data, large scale like variable decision making, and so I mean, AI is just primed for poker. I mean, it's primed for it's the exact solution as it is in so many other big data scenarios. But I think we're going to start seeing certainly in the solver space, we're going to start seeing a lot of advancements there.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, it's cool to know because I mean, I've seen poker evolve so fast, and that seems like the next direction that it's going to take. Absolutely. Is that we're going to be able to solve for much more multivariable games.
I also think the interface is going to get easier. Like you can just describe a hand of ChatGPT and you'd be like, so you don't have to worry about like all the drop downs and like and reading out of a solver and figuring out that. You can just be like, I had this hand, I was 3-bet from this position. Like, what should I do? And I think it's going to get easier for the average player to interact with.
Yeah, I think I had a really fascinating conversation with Joey Ingram, kind of about this same topic. Whenever me and these two guys went out to Vegas just on a fun trip to go see the Poker Go studio, but we got to meet up with Joey Ingram, and one of the coolest things that he said to me, which kind of blew my mind, was talking about the implications for AI in poker and working with solvers. Imagine like the biggest, I think, disconnect for people working with solvers is being able to interpret the outputs, right? Because most of the time, a solver is just a big calculator. It's not going to tell you why it got the answer, right? But imagine if it could. And imagine if an AI could literally tell you why
support the evidence.
The solution. Support
absolutely.
The evidence.
Yeah, go through the actual like variables that were used to make the decision, and then show the work, right? Like, I mean, that's. I think we're going to see a lot of that, the explicability behind some of those decisions. And I think there's, it's always a multivariable decision. So, but it can start telling you the heaviest weighted parts of that decision, and it can let you know, okay, your poor position overrode the fact that you had good odds on the, I mean, like starting to get some of that. That's going to be a great study tool for poker players to start understanding causality. I'm very excited for that.
Yeah, no, that's going to be really cool. I'm wondering if eventually we get to the point where, quite frankly, like poker coaches may become almost obsolete. Right?
There's already AI generated coaching that you can use inside some of these apps. Now that's just going to get better.
GTO Wizard has a little bit.
Yep. I think, and then it's going to get better. It's going to get a lot better. I think it'll start giving you some of that optimal play. I still think there's poker's such a human game that it's not going to be good at the live tell side. It's not going to be. I mean, maybe eventually with like image models or something like that. Yeah. But I think in the in the interim, it's a human experience. So like I think that's AI is a great tool. And it is getting more all encompassing, but I think there is something people like about interacting with a coach.
Yeah, for sure, absolutely. The human element to it is like seeing another person on the other side of the screen versus just getting it from a robot essentially. Yeah. So I mean, do you think AI security is going to be inevitably be needed for these poker sites going forward?
100%. I mean, especially when like artificial intelligence is used in anything like live games. I think that there's like it's most certainly going to be an element there. I mean, really like and anywhere that you're just. Even if somebody has a better solver and they want to secure it because they don't want, somebody just getting a customer account and interacting with it enough to be able to build a training set to recreate it. I mean, that's a lot of the type of stuff we stop. So yeah, we'll be there.
Awesome. Yeah. Well, be on the lookout for hidden layer, I guess. These poker sites coming out. That's awesome. Wrapping up a little bit. Yeah. I do want to ask some future questions. Like, what in your opinion is both the most dangerous and the most exciting application that you see for AI over the next couple of years?
Oh, that's a really good question. I think like when I think about that, I start to think about the things that are like relevant to everyone's life. So I really think that there's some exciting things in terms of self-driving. I think one of the things that we all drive, we all forget like how dangerous it is, and like that's how most people like. If most people when they die early, it's because of cars. And so I think that there's, so I really like the idea of making driving safer, and both in terms for my sake and for Hidden Layer's sake, it's more about the abusability of it. But just in general, like hive mind protocols, where like if you I'm self-driving, you're self-driving, and my car knows what you're gonna do. Like, I mean, that's like, that's just not just reacting. Like your car says, hey, I'm gonna change lanes ahead of time to my car, and they get it and they know it, and like that's just gonna lead to like so many fewer deaths.
Yeah.
And so I think that's really I'm very, very excited to see what happens in the self-driving world. The scariest stuff is the companies who are out here to make a buck, and they just start throwing out models to make decisions quick, and they don't. Again, like we talked about earlier, like, hey, that model became less accurate when I was considering everybody. So I guess I'm going to stop considering these groups, and that's used to make a drug, or that's used to like, I mean, that can get dangerous. And so I think if you don't treat it responsibly, if you don't do things like cyber is one of those things, but there's also a ton of other ways to responsibly build systems. I think, the biggest threat, and I released a threat report not too long ago where I said this, which is basically like, a lot of people get scared around that whole Terminator 2 scenario, like AI creating AI and all this stuff. And like, there are people who think that's inevitability. That's very, 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 very long off. We don't even have the hardware to support that kind of stuff today. So, but what's actually the problem is bad people. Bad people are going to do the same thing with AI that they've done with other systems. And if AI is scaled that much faster and it's that much more powerful, the bad people are still going to use it to, at a much more scaled and more powerful level. So I think that's what we have to be careful about. We have to really look out for those who are either just being irresponsible with it, or those who want to actively attack it and abuse it, because it's getting connected to so many things that if we're not securing it and we're not concerned about just the general efficacy and the integrity of the system, the same people who are attacking, cloud systems right now and servers right now are the ones who are attacking artificial intelligence systems, and there's a lot of them, and they're well funded. And I think we have to. I think the biggest threat we have is just these systems being abused.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's an evolving world. There's going to be a lot of challenges with it, and it's just going to be crazy to see what happens with all of these new technologies that come out. I mean, it all does kind of boil down to, with any technology, no technology is necessarily good or bad. It's usually the actors that determine, what happens.
That's 100% right.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's awesome. That was a lot of really cool perspective. I'm glad I got to sit down and talk to you for a little while. I'm glad you could carve out some time for me. Of course. Anything else happening in your life, big coming up in poker and social life, or with the company that you want to talk about on the way out?
No, I mean, I just, I think it's hopefully my we spend a lot of time with my kids. I love those guys. Their favorite poker player is Zach. They like watching. They like Stash. Yeah, they like Stash. So when they're always rooting for him on the stream. So
that's good.
So I want to call that out. But no, I think I'll be here. I'm not going anywhere. So I'll be around. But no, thank you very much for the conversation.
Absolutely, man.
It was a blast.
Yeah, I appreciate you sitting down and taking time with me. I appreciate everybody watching, for listening. My name's Greg Potter. We sat down with Tito. We'll see you guys in the next one. Thanks for listening.